This is a highly rated movie adapted from a true story. This movie received as many as 14 nominations from film critics associations. It vividly depicts the reality of the border situation. The story takes place in the gray zone along the U.S. Mexico border, a haven where illegal groups run rampant, and the most difficult area for the U.S. government to control. The female lead, Kate, is a rookie federal agent. She is currently under orders to rescue hostages kidnapped by illegal groups. With covering fire from surrounding SWAT units, armored vehicles charged straight into the target hideout and eliminated all the criminals with lightning speed. They thought it was just an ordinary rescue mission, but when they began clearing the scene, they made a horrifying discovery. Inside the damaged wall, something seemed to be hidden, deliberately placed there by someone. To their shock, it turned out to be rotting corpses. The team immediately searched the entire house, only to uncover 35 more bodies hidden the same way. The gruesome sight was so unbearable that even the well-trained SWAT officers began to vomit. Then, outside the house, they made another discovery, a locked basement that looked suspicious. But just as they prepared to force it open, a violent explosion ripped through. In an instant, the officers standing nearby were either killed or seriously injured, and what began as a kidnapping case escalated into a terror attack. Soon, media outlets rushed to cover the incident, and for a time it shocked the entire country. To contain the social impact, the government assigned CIA agent Matt to assist, with orders to crack the case as quickly as possible. Everyone knows the CIA only handles foreign affairs, while the FBI handles domestic affairs. This rare cooperation between the two showed that the case had already gone far beyond normal limits. Kate glanced at Matt, and to her surprise, this man was wearing sandals. Matt briefly summarized the investigation, saying most of the dead were Mexicans who had tried to cross the border. The one controlling the smuggling operations was Alarcon from Mexico. It was said that anyone who disobeyed orders during smuggling would meet a certain death. The house where the incident occurred was registered under Diaz, a wealthy businessman, but Diaz was closely connected with the crime boss Alarcon. Further investigation revealed Diaz was the U.S. contact for the Mexican organization, and he served as their cover for crimes committed inside the United States. By this point, the case was clear. Catching Alarcon would mean solving it. Matt then asked Kate if she was willing to join the special task force. After all, the mission ahead was extremely dangerous, and Alarcon was not even within U.S. territory. Thinking of the teammates who had died, Kate agreed without hesitation. The next day, Matt brought Kate aboard a military plane. Traveling with them was a stranger. Kate was puzzled, since Matt had not mentioned him before. Through conversation, she learned his name was Alejandro, once a prosecutor in Mexico, now working full-time for the CIA. Soon, the plane landed at a military base near the border. It was the closest location to Mexico, and here they would plan how to capture Alarcon. Listening to Matt's endless itinerary, Kate suddenly felt insignificant in the team. Every step seemed passive, and perhaps that was simply the CIA's style. Plans were never fixed, but adjusted depending on the situation. They quickly entered a conference room where all participants in the mission had gathered. They included soldiers returning from Afghanistan, state police, and Delta Force operators. The capture plan was laid out step by step. First, enter a prison inside Mexico, with the goal of escorting the mid-level leader of the criminal group, Guillermo. Second, bring Guillermo back to the U.S. for interrogation in order to learn Alarcon's location. Third, based on that information, begin the operation to capture Alarcon. Hearing this, Kate was puzzled. The first step was only to escort a prisoner, so why such a massive operation? What confused her even more was Alejandro, who leaned back, crossed his legs, and even dozed off. After the meeting, Kate wondered what Alejandro's actual role was, and why his name wasn't even on the mission briefing. Matt told her, "Just do what he says and don't ask questions." Kate was unhappy. Why couldn't Matt be transparent? Matt didn't bother hiding it, bluntly telling her that she was just there to finish up loose ends. For half a year, the FBI had captured small-time criminals, but they knew nothing about the masterminds behind them. That was why the CIA had stepped in, because the FBI's ability was limited, and to solve the case, they had to follow orders. According to the plan, the armed convoy drove across a desolate desert, and half an hour later they reached the U.S. Mexico border checkpoint. As the camera slowly advanced, the city of Juarez, Mexico's most crime-ridden city, came into view. Crossing the border, the Mexican side immediately sent out more than a dozen armored escort vehicles. Some led the way in front, while others patrolled behind. Every vehicle carried heavy weapons, and the soldiers were draped in ammunition belts. All this, just for escorting a prisoner, seemed unbelievably excessive. Just as Kate felt it was unbelievable, the scenes on the streets suddenly made her realize the truth. On both sides were traces of explosions and the wreckage of cars, and from time to time she even saw corpses hanging in a cruel manner. Gunfire echoed constantly through the streets and alleys, and the atmosphere of chaos was beyond words. Even during a brief stop, one can see missing missing person posters plastered all over the walls. Under the destruction of illegal groups, Juarez had already fallen, and calling it a city of hell was no exaggeration. At this moment, the convoy was forced to stop, and everyone could only hold their breath and wait for instructions. Soon, the radio guided them to change direction, saying that violent clashes between gangs were happening ahead, so they had to adjust the route. Although the prison holding the target was nearby, they spent a long time winding through alleys. With a sense of unease, the convoy finally arrived at the prison in Juarez. Before Kate could even get a clear view of the situation, Matt had already gone inside with his team. Alejandro warned Kate that here she must be cautious at every step, because even the local police could not be fully trusted, since the illegal groups had infiltrated every corner. As they spoke, Guillermo was escorted out. Without delay, the convoy started the return trip. They had to leave quickly under Mexican escort, otherwise a terrifying gunfight might break out. Noticing the surrounding vehicles, Kate suspected they might be members of the illegal group. When the convoy approached the border checkpoint, the escorting SWAT officers also withdrew. If an armed conflict was going to erupt, most likely it would happen near the checkpoint. Just as expected, the border was completely jammed with traffic. Hundreds of cars were stuck and unable to move, and it was clear danger was hidden among them. The attackers waiting to hijack the prisoner must have already arrived. With that in mind, the team immediately scanned the surroundings and quickly identified a red sedan and a green Honda. The men inside looked calm, but their hands were already gripping their weapons. To prevent an ambush, Matt ordered the team to strike first and said if the men made any move, they should fire immediately. Alejandro warned the men in the cars to stay calm, because any resistance would lead only to death. But the horrifying tragedy still happened. In just seconds, everyone in both cars was wiped out. Witnessing the sudden violence, Kate once again felt the difficulty of even the first step of the mission. Matt, on the other hand, looked completely indifferent, as if such scenes were nothing unusual. After this bloody episode, the convoy returned safely to the base. Finally regaining her senses, Kate was furious, accusing Matt and the others of being reckless, asking why they had to shoot before confirming the identity of their targets. Matt brushed her off with a few casual words and turned away. The immediate priority was to interrogate Guillermo, because they had to find Alarcon's hideout. Guillermo, the brother of Diaz, stubbornly claimed he knew nothing. Seeing they could not extract any information, Matt called in the mysterious and ruthless Alejandro. Just one glance from him made Guillermo tremble with fear. It turned out Alejandro had once gone undercover inside the illegal group, and his ruthless reputation was infamous. The agents inside the room wisely left, even turning off the camera on the way out. As Alejandro began to apply brutal water torture, Guillermo had no choice but to confess everything he knew. Meanwhile, Kate was taken to a high point of the base and told to look at Juarez through binoculars. The city below was engulfed in gunfire, filled with scenes of gangs fighting each other. The reason for such chaos was clear. There was more than one illegal group controlling the city. This was the meaning behind capturing Alarcon, because it would not only solve the case, but also bring order to Mexico. Before Kate could think further, Matt took her along for another mission, saying they needed to gather an important lead overnight. But as usual, he did not reveal what it was. Soon they drove to a border transit center crowded with Mexican workers heading into the U.S. They all looked as confused as Kate, not knowing what they were caught up in. Alejandro's task was to screen everyone, trying to find certain people. At this point, Kate could no longer stay silent. She questioned Matt, demanding to know what they were really doing, why he could not explain the purpose of the mission, and why she had been treated like nothing but a decoration. Facing her reasonable questions, Matt finally revealed part of the truth. A few hours earlier, Guillermo had confessed two things. First, only his brother Diaz knew where Alarcon lived. Second, there was a secret tunnel at the border used for transporting contraband, and all smuggled migrants also passed through it. Since the exact location was unclear, they had come here to question people and hoped to identify someone who had used the tunnel. That night, Kate could not sleep. She searched Juarez online. Brutal images filled the screen, showing gangs massacring civilians, and the horrific scenes everywhere were unbearable to watch. At this moment, Kate began to understand Matt's use of violence against violence, but she also felt their plan to capture Alarcon might fail, because in Mexico, Alarcon was like a god. The next day, Mexican contacts helped locate the entrance to the tunnel, hidden near the wreckage of a car in the desert. Now, with the exact location confirmed, they were only one step away from the final move. In fact, the first two missions had not only been preparation, but also meant to put pressure on Alarcon. The next step was to freeze his bank accounts in the U.S., which would force Diaz to return to Mexico to avoid suspicion. And once Diaz was on the move, they could follow him to capture Alarcon. Because the CIA had no authority inside the U.S., the account freezing operation had to be handled by Kate. At this point, the FBI had countless ways to freeze any account. After confirming the person was laundering money for the criminal organization, federal agents arrested the woman making the deposit on the spot. Inside the backpack, besides stacks of bundled cash, there are some very noticeable rubber bands. Matt said that was reason enough to freeze the account, but Kate wanted to investigate further. Ignoring Matt's warning, Kate stormed into the bank involved in laundering, determined to gather more evidence. But little did she know, this reckless move nearly cost her life. Through the investigation, Diaz had taken out a loan of $17 million from the bank, then ordered people to deposit $9,000 of dirty money every day to pay it back, a method that perfectly avoided bank supervision and laundered the funds under the guise of legality.
See, $17 million.
It's a bogus bust, Kate.
What?
You can't prosecute it. No one controls who deposits money in an account. An attorney will have that money back in a few months, but a lot of heads will roll before that.
But we can arrest Manuel for now. We can get him off the street.
You gotta get Manuel called back to Mexico. That's the objective.
We have no jurisdiction in
Matt could not understand Kate's thinking, wondering why she still didn't get it when half the mission was already completed, and he felt it was truly sad. But Kate felt that trying to capture Alarcon was nothing more than a fantasy. After all, he was already as rich as a nation in Mexico, and the most realistic approach was to arrest Diaz first. Unwilling to accept this, Kate reported back to headquarters, but her superior's response was identical to Matt's. The direction of the case was already clear, so what was a junior agent doing questioning it? Her superior told Kate to learn more from the task force and hinted that once the operation was over, she would understand. Confused and dissatisfied, Kate couldn't make sense of it, so she and her partner Reggie went to a bar. There, she met a local police officer named Ted, and they hit it off instantly. Fueled by alcohol, Kate followed Ted back to his place for a date, but just as they were getting intimate, Kate accidentally noticed Ted had a rubber band with him, and that rubber band was exactly the kind used by the smugglers before. It turned out Kate had exposed herself when she barged into the bank, and Ted was actually an assassin sent by the group. At that moment, Ted revealed his true nature and attacked Kate. Just as Kate was about to be strangled, Alejandro appeared like a phantom. As it turned out, everything had been within Matt's expectations. Having survived the ordeal, Kate was filled with regret, realizing how inexperienced she still was. Alejandro told Kate that the assassin's real purpose was to gather intelligence, because their true target was the entire task force. Meanwhile, not far away in Juarez, a little boy woke up his father, who was taking a nap. The scene of father and son together looked heartwarming, but no one would imagine that the officer was actually part of the criminal network. He had been forced to become a corrupt cop, all for the sake of survival. The boy showed curiosity about his father's gun, but the father warned him never to touch it, as he didn't want his own tragic fate to repeat in his son's life. Silvio, the officer, drove his police car every day to help transport contraband, and then delivered it to the secret tunnel on the border. Elsewhere, Alarcon was growing restless, and he finally summoned Diaz back to Mexico. Just as the plan had predicted, everything was unfolding exactly as the CIA expected. Diaz's departure from the United States was monitored in real time by satellite, and as long as they kept following him, they could find Alarcon. Seeing this, Matt immediately launched the closing operation, ordering the squad to raid the tunnel that very night. They were determined to deliver a fatal blow to all the criminal networks, taking them down in a single night. Before departure, Matt wanted Kate to stay behind, but she could not accept it. It turned out her only purpose was to legitimize the CIA's actions. Though her pride was crushed, Kate refused to back down, believing that since she had been part of the mission all along, she had every right to take part in the final stage. Suppressing her anger, she gathered her gear, determined to fight alongside the others. As night fell, the haunting twilight signaled that the battle was about to begin. Fully armed and equipped with night vision, the 10-person squad advanced toward the target. Guided by satellite, they quickly found the location, and the tunnel was indeed beside the wreckage of a car. With night vision and thermal imaging, the pitch-black night turned bright as day. Once inside the tunnel, the squad launched indiscriminate fire, and every living figure in sight was drowned in bullets. The assault team moved with perfect coordination and order, while Kate was so nervous she could hardly breathe. Her body shook as she crept forward, terrified of losing the group. When she saw Alejandro turn into a separate passage, Kate followed without hesitation. At the same time, Silvio was unloading goods, growing anxious as the sound of gunfire echoed closer, but too afraid to abandon what he was carrying. Then suddenly, the gunfire in the tunnel ceased, and the terrified accomplice could no longer remain calm. He tried to grab the keys and escape, but in the next second, he was shot dead. It was Alejandro who had emerged, warning Silvio not to make any sudden moves and to follow his instructions carefully. Alejandro had no intention of killing Kate, only telling her not to follow him. Beyond the tunnel lay Mexican territory, where Kate, as an FBI agent, had no authority to act. Without any extra words, Alejandro drove the police car and took Silvio away from the place. When Kate staggered out of the tunnel, she was already filled with anger. She lashed out at Matt, demanding to know what he had been hiding and why Alejandro was acting alone. Seeing that things had reached this point and could no longer be concealed, Matt slowly revealed the final truth of the mission. Alejandro's cover had been blown during an undercover operation in Mexico, and as revenge, the criminal organization brutally murdered his wife and daughter. After losing his family, Alejandro became a killer on the border and eventually joined a Colombian organization. But no one could have imagined that behind this organization stood the U.S. government. Because the Mexican criminal organizations had disrupted the market, the U.S. had to send in the CIA to take control and ordered them to wipe out the Mexican criminal groups within a limited time. Alejandro was acting alone because his only role was to kill Alarcon, which would not only restore order to the contraband market, but also give him the chance to take personal revenge. Hearing this shattered Kate's worldview. She realized that the so-called joint operation was nothing but a facade, and that in the end, they were helping evil flourish. She could not accept the actions of her own government, and she vowed to make the truth public when she returned. Matt, however, did not care at all. Meanwhile, Alejandro forced Silvio to speed through the roads, and with satellite tracking, he located Diaz's car. He ordered Silvio to use the siren to stop Diaz, then had him step out for inspection. While Diaz was still confused, Alejandro suddenly shot Silvio dead and crippled Diaz's right leg. In order to save his own life, Diaz was forced to betray his boss. Soon, Alejandro used the cover to take down the inner guards and swiftly eliminated the final threat. Moving like a ghost through empty ground, Alejandro's skill and precision were unmatched. When he entered the heart of the villa, he saw Alarcon sitting with his family, enjoying dinner. Knowing this was his enemy, Alejandro sat down at the table across from him, holding back his rage. Alarcon was not afraid, and after a moment of tension, he regained his calm. He told his children to continue eating, then spoke to Alejandro in English. Through the conversation, Alarcon realized what was happening, but he showed no remorse. He said his actions had never been aimed at one person, but at anyone who posed a threat to the organization. What he said so casually was unbearable for Alejandro to hear. Though Alarcon knew he was doomed, he begged Alejandro not to kill him in front of his family. Alejandro let out a cold laugh. Clearly, Alarcon had overestimated himself, for Alejandro's revenge was to break him first in spirit, then in body. With the final gunshot, Alejandro avenged his loved ones. A few days later, Alejandro came to Kate's apartment and pulled out a disclaimer for her to sign. This document would state that the entire operation had been fully legal and within limits, with no violations at all. Kate could not understand. She was torn apart by the collapse of her sense of justice, and she refused to sign. But Alejandro pressed his gun against her chin, giving her only two choices: sign it or die. When life is threatened, all principles and beliefs lose their meaning. In the end, Kate signed the paper, forced to compromise with reality. Before leaving, Alejandro advised Kate to move away, because this was a land of wolves and she would never survive here. After saying this, Alejandro turned and left, leaving Kate standing in shock. As Alejandro walked downstairs, Kate rushed to the balcony and aimed her gun at him. Alejandro calmly glanced back a few times, then walked away without turning again. Kate never pulled the trigger, not because she lacked courage, but because her entire sense of morality had already been destroyed. And so the film ends. When it was released in 2015, it caused a huge sensation, and to this day, it is still regarded as a classic by countless viewers. It was director Taylor Sheridan's most searing depiction of the border, and his strongest condemnation of how contraband has devastated lives. Unlike traditional crime thrillers, the film contains very few violent scenes, instead relying on the layered buildup of its plot leading to the finale. It reminds us that the world will always have gray zones. Some choose to drift along with the tide, while others choose to carry the burden and push forward. A truly outstanding high-rated movie, and if you're interested, you should definitely check out the original.